So happy to see so many familiar and not so familiar faces. My name is Dick Kawoya. I'm an associate professor in the School of Information Science. I almost said library. We've not quite moved on, but we are sort of repositioning. I'm also a former interim director of the school, so glad to know that that counts in terms of this evening. So I know exactly what my colleague and dear friend Karen Gavigan has had to do the last several months. So thank you so much. If you are here this morning, you know that our speaker tonight was here as a panelist at our DI event, that is the Diversity and Inclusion Symposium, which we hold every year for the last 5 years. So we were not being cheap, sort of double dipping, having him speak in the morning and the evening. The goal was to maximize our time with Jason, who happens to be the director of the National Library for the Blind, an organization that does incredible work for that group of people. I happen to do my research in the area of information policy, law, and ethics, and the last few years I've focused my work on looking at access barriers for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled, and specifically was involved in what we call the Marrakesh Treaty, which is an international instrument to facilitate access for the blind, visually impaired, and print disabled. I was glad to learn recently that Jason was actually part of that process, representing the United States delegation that was involved in representing the US government positions in the preparation for this international treaty. Jason is obviously based in Washington, D.C., but this is homecoming for him. He's a native South Carolinian in many ways than one. So we are happy to have him come to speak to us about the important work they do at the National Library Service for the Blind and the Print Disabled. His bio is in the program. I'm not going to go over everything, but it's important to mention that Jason is very, very passionate about providing services to the blind. He's very passionate about access for the blind, and so many other folks that fall in that category. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Jason to talk to us about information and the individual, a conversation on inputs, society outcomes, and librarianship. Jason?
Thank you. I used to be a teacher, so preparation and organization matter in having an effortless presentation when you are talking to those who are considered adolescents. They are your biggest critics, and if you've forgotten it, think about how you were as a teenager. I am deeply honored to be here this evening. I definitely am kind of speechless. I never thought that I would be doing this. I was telling someone the last time I was in this room was the school was honoring Fritz Holling. Amazing conversation. Just an amazing man. I never thought I'd actually meet him. So it's been some years, but I am just deeply humbled to be doing this for you and to be talking about something that I have had kind of a passion for, but it finally expressed itself in a variety of ways, and here we are. I never thought that this low country boy, I still see myself as a boy even though I am turning 50, going from South Carolina to the Library of Congress. That is just a tremendous, interesting feat. So I am deeply honored to be back, but also to kind of say thank you. This is a conversation to all the people that I've seen in this room, lots of you who I know, former professors, colleagues, friends, bosses, just wonderful people So this is almost, in a sense, a love letter to you in a conversation of, hopefully, I have made you proud in traversing topics that I believe deeply about and that we should all consider. I am going to keep looking at my phone, not for any calls, but for those who know me, I love to talk, so this is a deadly thing that you've done. It is problematic that you've given me this opportunity. In thinking about a few things today, I have kind of altered my presentation in a way to really get to the heart of the matter. Usually that's a dangerous thing, and my staff is like, oh, he's going off script, you don't do that. But we have had some just wonderful conversations today that have really allowed, I think, a lot of us to think of life in different ways and how we want to navigate that. So in preparing for this, I immediately knew what I wanted to talk about, given the current state of the world from an informational side, which is information and individual. We come to this at a variety of areas. The college has communications. The school is libraries, which is now the iSchool, information. We are kind of overloaded with that. And when I say overloaded, I'm going to try to traverse a variety of topics, and if I do this right, I'm going to weave it into one thing, and then you will see how this relates back to kind of all of us, but how we see ourselves from input, society, culture, and how we treat each other. So in looking at this, it will also come through the lens of what I do now. There is just a plethora of things that we have to consider when we are talking about inputs and then who actually is able to contribute to those inputs. We like to say it in libraries of all calibers, and I know why we say this, so just know it's because of a budget. We serve everybody. Yeah, that's when you need to say that when your funding is about to get cut, the town manager, the dean of the college, you need to get us some money in here. We can't be. So there's a reason why we say this. Let's be upfront. But we don't serve everybody. We honestly know that. We don't always get that input. So by not having certain voices at the table, particularly in a way that, as a sighted person, we bring a different view, yes, I have to say it that way, to how we are going to understand that. How we gather information, see information, read information, obtain it, how it is just almost consuming us. I can look across this room and just know from the federal government standpoint, we are swimming in a sea of information that is too much. You need tons of people, information professionals, to navigate it. Right now, there's an anxiety level in this room, believe it or not, for some people who realize I have to check that email, even though he's talking, I should be paying attention. That is a part of information overload. You've got to do it. Otherwise, you feel detached. I feel sick. Why is that? On the opposite side, where we in this room have vast amounts of information and a variety of portals, there is a information deficit area for a variety of people who do not have sight. They can't get enough of it. You know why? Because the format is not there, the access is not there, the connectivity in some cases, the geography. And we don't always think about that. My organization, where I am dealing with, tries to understand it with a variety of other vendors who are doing amazing work to try to bring information to people who should have never had to ask for it to be done in this country. As you can see on the screen, this should come of interest for those of you who are data architects, love stats, because I love stats. My staff knows I don't talk about anything unless I have background information on how to do it properly, which means what's the data? What does it look like? And since I've had to be, in a sense, trained and very persuasive to calm my own self down before I want to utter any type of stance, because when I say things now, it does go across the country. We have libraries called network libraries in all 50 states, U.S. territories. The Library of Congress is a large informational behemoth. It knows and sees all. We know of every book published in this world. Think about that. We actually do massive amounts of data capture, screenshots that come back to us. Where does that information go? What do you do with it? We get to see it, but what happens if somebody else wants to see it and it's not? So on the screen, you look at what is considered a population of people who, at a certain point, might not be able to view this the way we do currently. Another thing that you should think about, which I did not as a teen, again, when you're young, you don't think about this thing. Oh my goodness, I'm going to age. Now that I'm 50, 50 is wonderful. When I was a teen, that would be like, oh, you are so old. Oh my God, you're 50. My God, 50, you're crazy. Now you get to 50 and it's like, oh, I'm still enjoying this. This is kind of wonderful. But to say that, I do have to prepare myself in knowing at a certain point, my faculties are going to start to diminish. But I still feel vibrant and I want to be connected. A lot of you do. So what does that mean? Are you prepared to figure out how you want to read, learn, for life, love, labor, and leisure? What does that mean for you? Have you thought about that as you age? There's a lot of things that we don't really think about, and sometimes society should be thinking about that for all of us. That should just be, in a sense, yes, a right, but it's just the common good to say at some point we're all going to have this. Some of us, unfortunately, navigate that earlier than we would have expected, particularly since our mission has to deal with a variety of things when it comes to the blind, which we primarily call vision impaired, and we also work with veterans. We had to be creative because, if you really read that, the country basically said, hey, we have this reading room in the Library of Congress. But in looking at that, a lot of people began to notice that veterans would come in and there was nothing for them to read because they were injured. And that was a very interesting thing for the country to say, well, let's actually create this service. So as we begin to think about how we gather information from early on in this country, we began to see that there is an important need. And with that, there is an act that was passed called the Pratt-Smoot Act. As we go through this, however, things began to change because, as you can see in this age that the country was founding in, we are moving away from agrarian and we're moving into the industrial age. So guess what is starting to appear? Technology. We have to also navigate that, and that's the fun part of my job, which I never thought I'd actually see. Our populations, as I said, come from a variety of areas. When people think about the National Library Service, it usually is a certain demographic that people believe, but it is open to everybody. Children, youth, young adults, seniors. We also are mandated two specific groups, blind and veterans. So as you can see, we have a big initiative right now going on to capture and connect with as many veterans as possible. The VA and the National Library Service is talking quite a lot about how to navigate this. We just kind of celebrated 90 years. I was there to kind of help kick that off, and so we are just wonderfully pleased to be doing a lot of this work. And looking at this, however, there are challenges. As you go through with technology, as I said, things change, and you have to adapt. One of the things that I never thought I would do is bring in a side that I really didn't get to play with a lot in library school, and that's the IT side. Who would have known that I, from the IS side, that's all that librarianship, that wonderful things of collections and platforms, and let's talk about databases, let's look at some of these derivatives, how do we do with serials? And then all of a sudden, I get to then step back and say, oh, we're going to talk about the platform that delivers this. I'm going to now make a product and tool. And because we're in the federal government, I have to navigate, and I'm quite sure our security, wonderful guests will understand this, the dearth of the federal government's security measures. So it's an interesting job to play with the IT side and the IS together to create products and services. And I'll show you some images of some of the devices that we're creating. But that's something that I don't think a lot of librarians think about. It's usually, I want to go here, director, children's services, maybe academic, B-school. There is a whole genre of things that I don't think a lot of people think about when it comes to being in this profession that I dared dream and have now actually achieved part of that. We need to think about what it means to play with information for everybody. And in the role that I am, I get to do that. So one of the earliest things, and some of you, yes, it is not the one that you have in your closet, the record player. This one, however, is from 1930s. If you were to look at it very closely, but you cannot, the needle I don't know why we did this. I don't know why. What we did, we had it, the needle itself is designed in an Art Deco design with a gold brocade in a set, just beautiful. And I went, and how are they going to see that? But the goal was to listen to the record player. We have, for example, we're churning out so much information that we have volumes and reams. You might not know that we have the world's largest music braille library. Tons of items for people to listen to a variety of things. I have just been humbled to have parents write me and say, let me tell you how your organization has helped my child. They'll be going to Carnegie Hall for their first recital or their concerto. And I just wanted you to know that it will bring you sometimes to tears to know that you are truly impacting the front lines of people's lives, where in some cases, I don't want to say we take it for granted, it's just nonchalant. You turn on the radio, you listen to read sheet music, and off you go. Other people don't have that leisure, but they should have access to this. And what does that mean if they don't? How are we going to treat each other? So as we go through this, here are some of the newer ways of the devices that we kind of left, the record player between 45 and 35, and we move now to something that we have, and I definitely know this because I was here. Lisa can also talk about the different machines that we had and the color cases that have now gone from the brown to the green and now to the blue, and I'm now here looking at this player. So you can see the contrast of the new and the old. In technology, however, one of the things that I think we need to be very cognizant about, because we are at National Library Service looking to figure out how to navigate the newer technologies. So a lot of people have a Siri or a Cella, and we are playing with voice activation. Never thought I'd be sitting there talking about code. Just never thought, oh my goodness, let's look at that. And it's going okay, it's rough. It is rough because if you think about it, imagine for all the people who understand this, imagine WorldCat at a voice activated command, which means you are connecting a code that is able to go into your, hopefully, pristine and perfect catalog that you have wonderfully cataloged well in all ways possible, that can easily, at a voice command, say, I'm looking for this book, this song, this piece of material, and it on voice command will do that. We are running into lots of challenges, but it is fun trying to get to that where we have a device that will be voice activated in the future for our patrons to actually just call up and then say, this is the book I want, and it will begin reading it. Again, never thought I'd be playing with IT, code, and of course bringing the catalog inside to this. But in understanding that, for a lot of us, as we swim through things, this is the part that is nuanced. You've probably done this like I did, and you said, oh my goodness, the federal government is watching me. So you search for a trip. You're looking for a purse. You're looking for some specific shoes. And all of a sudden, the advertisements start appearing all throughout. And you're like, wow, that's kind of interesting. So let's talk about how that's communicated. Well, as we know deep down, that's an algorithm that has been following us, refining us, wanting to give us the perfect you. I want you to be perfect. But that perfect, if you pay attention to it, is singular and solitary to you. The perfect book, the perfect dress, just for you. In looking at that, flipping it on its other side, we don't need an algorithm for the population that I sometimes have to navigate. Society has not done sometimes the best job because of not providing services, not making sure that newspapers, books, materials, resources, and music is there for them. So isolation sits in sometimes automatically. We want to avoid that in society. We want to bring more people to these resources. As we do that, however, one of the things that we have to continue to navigate is really what type of society that we want to think about when we say we are trying to form a more perfect union. I love that phrase because I remember specifically from waking up on Saturday morning with ABC, and there was a wonderful woman in the 1970s who was singing that, talking about the Constitution, for we the people in order to form a more perfect union. Never forget that. Because that's what we're really trying to do, right? We're really trying to form a more perfect union in all that we do. And that's a powerful thing if you think about who is in that union, whether they can say it, see it, or not. They should have access to it all. Obsolescence is a big challenge for us as we navigate the technology. As I said this morning, there is probably 4 to 5 people in this room right now who are carrying a flip phone and do not want to admit it. Why? You're comfortable with it. And that's going to be a problem for you because obsolescence in this day and age says, we're going to make sure we just start to make that phone not work for you. We're going to make sure that has a little bit of problems, there's glitches, it can't download, because I want to force you to upgrade. You need to do this. Some of that also borders, unfortunately, in another area, which is going to be digital literacy. Not everybody is going to come in with a specific situation where they will be born into technology from the get-go, vision or not, and just flourish with it up to the top. We have veterans who come back from wars, who were one way when they went and now are different. We have aging. And how would you feel if all of a sudden you have me, the NLS director, saying, I just sent you this wonderful player that you love, and you've had it for 10 years. I need it back. Because what I would love to tell you is that you too can now access our services on our virtual platform that we have in the cloud. But if you do not like a smartphone, I just took something very powerful, very controlling that you had from you because you might not want to deal with this new phone. So obsolescence is important as we navigate our structures for our persons. And looking at this, bringing in the electronic Braille reader. A lot of us, when you hear Braille, you think print, but we have some wonderful vendors that we're working with that actually are creating e-Braille. This is one of the most popular things that we have going on, if you've never thought about it. The pins pop up and down really, really quickly. The newer ones, this job just makes me smile when I think about this, when I got to this. There is a vendor, which I can mention. I always think about my role now, like, wait, we do have that in congressional record. Okay, so I can say this. So they're called HumanWare, and they have a device that could be coming out that is much larger and can actually, if they were connecting that device to this, I would need to talk a little bit slower, but it would actually create the slide for a person who is visually impaired to feel it. So they could basically feel a PowerPoint presentation, and the pins are getting much faster. Think about that. That's just a small version that we play with, but the new ones are going to be and much lighter, very amazing. That is something I never thought I'd see, but why is that important? When I looked at the device, picked it up, felt it, looked at it, they asked for my critique. All right, here I go. My deputy, who's also named Jason, we call it the reign of the Jasons at NLS and LSA. But I have the wonderful pleasure of having, which is another part of my conversation, which you should think about, the pleasure of having employees who are visually impaired, print disabled. We no longer say handicap. We barely say disabled, but print disabled, much more larger milieu. They picked that device up and tore it apart. Wonderfully, which is what you're supposed to do. They found things that I would have never found as a sighted person. That allowed me to sit back as a director when it was all over and gather them, and they were just getting used to me, and I looked ahead to say, I have to say thank you. I have never had the opportunity to work with professionals like you to help me understand how I did not know what I needed or perceive the world in the way that I had until I met you. This is absolutely beautiful what you just did. And I think if we had more of that in our lives, we begin to understand each other, we'd see each other differently because we all have different abilities. The goal is to understand where those abilities lie and how we can bring that together. As I begin to close, thank goodness I'm on time, look at there. There is so much more information that is here and available. But for those who are usually the most vulnerable, it can just be a desert. And a lot of my staff, when I was in Vermont, I was Vermont's state librarian for a wonderful time. If you've never been, it's a beautiful state, outdoor Eden, just amazing. But they used to say this once the pandemic hit. In the before time, and I said, oh my goodness, we're almost like on a fairy tale, in the before times. But in the before times, we didn't really think about that. Vermont's a very small state. The New England's up there did not like, and I tell a few people that here today, they did not like when I said this. Vermont and South Carolina are so alike. And they were, oh my God, how dare you? We are not like Southerners. And I would say, but you are. One's just more, in a sense, conservative, and the other is just more progressive and liberal. But you do the same thing, and they'd ask how, and I'd be like, the hospitality, amazing, just the laughter, the industrialness, and you're both rural. I know rural states, that's where I came from. And saying that, when the pandemic hit, the State House was bombarded with love. Governor Scott, Republican governor there, who I love, first appointed me, was just an amazing man, came to understand people said some things that we had not paid attention to, which was when the pandemic hit and you decided to go to hybrid and virtual models, I am bedridden and I now can watch and be part of a committee hearing and voice my opinion. I can listen because I am blind to what is going on. And I could not drive to Montpelier, which in the state of Vermont is like 2 hours in some cases, through mountains, valleys, rivers, and streams to come to the State House. So as we go forward in this new age, there are things that we should think about on how we want to treat ourselves for a better society, who should be at the table. I don't care what it looks like. The goal is going to be, if we say who we say we are and who we want to be, we need to think about what does that mean when we view us. We, not I. As I close, I will leave you with a wonderful quote that I listened to Maya Angelou say, and it's very short, and I do take it with me all the time. It'll make you laugh, but it is actually dead serious when you have a lot of people, I use it when this happens, and there's a lot of people brainstorming, these wonderful ideas come out, and then you notice no one's kind of speaking up to say, well, I'm going to take that idea and do it. So here's the quote. Whenever you see yourself in this wonderful conversation of ideas and you look around saying, somebody's picking it up. From Maya Angelou, it will never work until you do. You've got to do that. No matter what you want, you are the starting point to do this. Thank you. I hope that I've made this university proud based upon where I'm at in this achievement, and who knows what the future looks like. I expect to see a lot of people in this room do wonderful things as I hear it from afar in DC at the Library of Congress. And should you be coming this year at ALA, I will be there to welcome you with Dr. Hayden to our open house. Thank you, and again, I love this school, I love my professors, I love this college, and I love all of you. Thank you.